and they handcuffed them around the pipe. And they beat them, and they beat them, and they beat them.
They drove down the road a couple of miles. She said that all 4 of them raped her.
People want to put it aside and move on, but it's something that always will be here.
It told the story about the quest for freedom in America.
First, it was just hard to get a sense of what really even happened. There was a young couple, the Pagets, Willie and Norma Paget. They were coming home late at night. Their car broke down. They pulled over to the side of the road. Willie Paget was trying to get the car started, and that's the point where sort of the story separates, and you kind of have 2 completely different versions at that point.
The story that they told was that a vehicle came by, saw that they were in distress. It was 4 black men that offered to push the car off and help them. That after a period of time they stopped pushing the car. Willie Paget had a discussion with them. They quarreled. These men supposedly jumped him. He supposedly defended himself, struck them with a stick, but they overpowered him, took his wife away in their car, and that was the last Willie saw of her until the next morning, early Saturday morning, when he was reunited with his wife, and she said that she had been raped.
Willie Paget got a ride back to town, went to the sheriff's office in Lake County in Leesburg, and reported that his wife had been abducted by 4 Negroes. Willis McCall, who was the sheriff of Lake County, actually wasn't in town at the time, but his chief deputy launched this search for the men that Willie Paget said he was looking for. They drove all around. They got to Groveland, and Willie Paget said, "There's the car." He and the deputy went in, arrested Walter Irvin and Samuel Shepard, and then they picked up Charlie Greenlee, who was a young 16-year-old boy that was really sleeping in a railroad station, trying to get a ride back to his home. Greenlee was later identified by Norma Paget as being one of the people who had attacked her. So they had 3 in jail. Ernest Thomas fled the county. A manhunt was launched. This posse of white men chased him all over the state, caught him up near Taylor County, and actually shot him to death.
It's a point of some controversy whether Norma, in fact, had made up a story that she had been raped. It's pretty easy to believe Charles Greenlee when he says he didn't know Sammy Shepard and Walter Irvin, because he wasn't with them that night. We know that. He spent the night at this railroad depot. Walter and Sammy always contended that they had been together that night, that they had taken Sammy's brother James' car to Orlando. Thomas was out partying around Groveland with his friends. They were not together. They were in 3 different places in the wee hours of that Saturday morning.
This is easy for the authorities. This gets a lot of people off the hook. Norma Paget's husband was known to have been fairly brutal with his wife. They had broken up at one point, and her father had told him, "I don't want you causing any more trouble for my daughter." And apparently, he had done something to her that night, and they may have been concerned that her father was going to take action against him and may have needed to come up with a story to explain what they were doing. For Sheriff Willis McCall, his primary job was to turn out citrus workers, and historically the Grove owners had turned to him to supply black workers. But after World War II, blacks returning from the Army didn't want to do this. They wanted something better. And so, by bringing these people to justice, he's able to solve several problems that he is facing. He is going to show two of the blacks who have been known to not want to work in the fields and to want no part of the citrus industry. He's going to show them, you better do it my way. They all seem to have been brought together because of this crime. Just happenstance, really.
What happened after the initial 3 defendants were arrested was riots broke out. Black neighborhoods were being shot up, some houses were burned, mobs were sort of circling through Groveland. Several nights of rioting went on to the point that the governor of Florida, Fuller Warren, had to call out the National Guard. It was a huge story all over the country.
I remember seeing sandbags, and I remember seeing a .50 caliber machine gun. And at that time, people that lived on one side of the town, black people per se, if they wanted to cross over to the other side of town, there would be a National Guardsman. He would get on the hood of the car and ride with them on the other side, I guess for their own personal protection.
They burnt down about 3 houses in Bay Lake. And I learned later from my daddy that they came to burn our house down too. But Mr. Edge stopped them.
Willis McCall, to protect the 3 surviving defendants, took them to Rayford State Prison. A couple days later, Harry T. Moore, the head of the Florida NAACP, and the national office of the NAACP sent representatives to Rayford.
They made it clear that they had been brutalized by McCall. McCall has a well-documented track record of not only beating prisoners, but eventually killing a prisoner in his custody. And there is absolutely no reason to doubt them. They had marks on their bodies. They had cut marks on their feet from glass. It is clear that they were brutalized by McCall or his deputies while they were in custody as he tried to get a confession from them.
So Harry T. Moore and the National NAACP immediately began charging McCall with brutality and with violating their constitutional rights, and ended up really representing the Groveland defendants as the trial came up.
The trial itself is a mockery. The Orlando Sentinel, even before the trial begins, has run a front-page editorial cartoon showing electric chairs that they intend for these young men to occupy.
She pointed her finger at each one of the defendants. She described how they raped her in very blunt detail. It was a powerful testimony.
With all of the baggage about rape and black men and a white woman, innocence and evil unfolded in this story. This was an assault on white America, not just on this white woman.
There was no way a white jury was going to release 3 blacks accused of raping a white woman. That no matter how shallow the evidence was, no matter what they thought of the people involved, they were going to have to come back with a conviction if they were going to continue living in that county.
The court rules they have to have a new trial. A hearing was coming up on November 7th in Tavares at the Lake County Courthouse, a pretrial hearing. Willis McCall has to go to Rayford to pick up Irvin and Shepard and bring him back to Lake County, which he'd done several times before. McCall's story is he's in the car with Irvin and Shepard, who are sitting in the front seat beside him, handcuffed together. Yates is now in his own car driving ahead looking for a lynch mob, making sure that the road is clear.
He had a wiggle in the front of the car that a tire was going flat or he had some kind of problem. He said he stopped, he looked at it, got back in the car, drove on further, pulled over again, he had a flat tire. When he got the prisoners out of the car, asked them to get out of the car to help him change his tire, that Shepard struck him with the flashlight that Willis McCall had left on the seat of the car and told Walter Irvin to grab his gun. That McCall pulled out his revolver and shot them in self-defense and kept firing until he knew that they were down and that he was safe. Shepard died at the scene. He was shot in the head. Irvin received 3 bullet wounds but miraculously survived. The next day he told a very different story.
He told us that when they got to Wedsdale, they pulled off the road and they got on the dirt road to go to the Barries. When they got about 10 miles out of Wedsdale, Mr. McCall started jimmering, shaking his steering wheel, cough like you got a flat tire. When he did finally stop, he walked in front of the car, came round to the side of Sam's door. When he opened the door for Sam, as Sam turned to get out of the car, Walter Lee said he shot him right in his forehead. Just like that. He said he shot him so fast and he felt his weight moving until he knew that Sam was dead. He said, but by that time, he had done shot him also. And he said he remembered hearing him say, "Come on back, I have killed the son of a bitches." He said, but when Mr. Yates got back and he was shining his light on him, he kicked Sam and he shined the light on him and said, but this is not dead. And he said he pulled out his gun and he aimed right at his head. And it went in the neck. And he said that time he was out. He tried to pretend like he was dead so that they wouldn't, kill him. But he still was alive.
It was such a polarizing event, and both sides sort of had pretty extreme positions on it. I mean, the white press in Florida portrayed it as a rape case, what a horrendous thing, and look what these young black men did. The black press and more liberal papers in Florida portrayed it as sort of a racial atrocity.
Growing up in a segregated society, it was just a way of life. He was an icon of being a man you didn't want to have any confrontation with, and it was instilled in most of the black children. So when you hear Willis V. McCall, that was a man you didn't tangle with.
We're fully capable of doing these things again, quite frankly. And we didn't know that about ourselves. And only when we know that about ourselves, I think, are we equipped then to deal with it.
Charles Greenlee, to me, is a hero. He took everything that a system that was badly stacked against him and the people of his race could dish out, and he survived. And the beauty of Charles Greenlee is that he's not bitter. The people who don't think this is an important chapter of history, I think they need to learn a lesson from the people who have survived from the original members of the Groveland Four.